So this series that started with a keynote address by Sister Mary Frohlich on eco-spirituality continued last week with our discussion on hope. And this week's discussion is on peace. But before we proceed any further, I'm just going to ask my two colleagues who form a team of three in shaping and organizing this series to introduce themselves. So I'll ask Mary and then Teresa to introduce yourselves, please.
Sure. Hi, I'm Mary Finlayson. I'm also a religious of the Sacred Heart, Canadian by birth, living in New York City. My ministry is to serve as Director of Vocation Ministry for our province, which is the United States, Canada. And I also do a lot of written translation and interpretation lately. And yeah, that's me. Happy to see everybody.
And I'm Teresa Blumenstein. I am normally based in Queens, New York City. I'm a member there of the Roman Catholic Church of the Parish of St. Francis Xavier. And I am connected to these two fine co-organizers by being a colleague of Sheila's in work with religious representing human rights and environmental justice missions of Catholic religious at the United Nations. And with this project, was built, starting from the seed of professional relationship, but here migrating onto something deeper and even more spiritual, and very happy to be part of this team.
Thank you to both of you. I'm going to share my screen, and I thought that tonight we could start with a prayer and followed by a meditation. And with tonight's theme being peace, one of the ways that I personally find peace is to sit in meditation. And so we're going to do that together, and I'll guide us through that. So I would just really like to welcome you all and thank you for being here tonight for this discussion on peace. And let us pray for peace as we share tonight, peace in our own lives and peace, world peace as well. So my co-organizers are going to lead us in this prayer.
Awaken to the mystery of being here and enter the quiet immensity of your own presence. Have joy and peace in the temple of your senses. Receive encouragement when new frontiers beckon. Respond to the call of your gift and the courage to follow its path. Let the flame of anger free you of all falsity.
May warmth of heart keep your presence aflame. May anxiety never linger about you. May your outer dignity mirror an inner dignity of soul. Take time to celebrate the quiet miracles that seek no attention. Be consoled in the secret symmetry of your soul. May you experience each day as a sacred gift woven around the heart of wonder.
And now I invite each one of us to get as comfortable as we can wherever we are sitting. Everything out of the way as much as possible. Nothing in your hands. You can mute yourself on the computer if you haven't already. And I just invite you to look at the image on the screen, or to close your eyes if you wish, or to focus on anything else that you may have in your room that draws you as we sit together. As we are together praying for peace, let us truly be with each other. Let us pay attention to our breathing. Let us be relaxed in our bodies and our minds. Let us be at peace with our bodies and our minds. Let us return to ourselves and become wholly ourselves. Let us maintain a half smile on our faces. Let us be aware of the source of being common to us all and to all living things. Evoking the presence of the great compassion, let us fill our hearts with our own compassion towards ourselves and towards all living beings. Let us pray that all living beings realize that they are all brothers and sisters, all nourished from the same source of life. Let us pray that we ourselves cease to be the cause of suffering to each other. Let us plead with ourselves to live in a way which will not deprive other beings of air, water, food, shelter, or the chance to live. With humility, with awareness of the existence of life and of the sufferings that are going on around us, let us pray for the establishment of peace in our hearts and on earth. And this prayer was offered to us by Thich Nhat Hanh. So now I invite you, when you're ready, to come back to our circle. And I just need to stop sharing for a moment because I forgot to share the sound. So this evening we're here to discuss peace. And this theme of peace, which for Christians is the theme for the second week of Advent, which is this week. And what gave rise to me this week on the theme of peace was really about the connection between peace and the importance of relationships. But I think in particular, I had this kind of maybe new awakening to the connection between peace and the importance of the relationship between myself, between humans, and the natural world, and how important that is for our own inner peace, our own right relationship between individuals, and also for world peace, that foundation of relationship between humans and the natural world. It's really foundational, and I've experienced that in my life on many different occasions, but this week in reflecting on it again, I just found myself back in that awareness of how important it is. Even I remember when I was a small child knowing that, and I think children do know that, and maybe we kind of outgrow that as we grow and become busy about many things. But to get back into that, one of the ways to do that is to take time to be with the natural world, which also brings us to ourselves. But the challenge to inner peace, at least in myself, is darkness, which comes in many forms. But I've also found in my life that I can learn something from befriending whatever that darkness is by listening and learning from the natural world. So how peace is revealed to us through the natural world in this season of darkness this year, as nature seems to be diminishing in its natural process, natural cycle, and light is dimming all around, there's a reason that we decorate with lights during this season. And we've already commented on how so many of us already have lights up during this season as we approach the longest darkness of the year, which is approaching in the northern hemisphere. And the darkness that we experience was never more evident to me at this time of year than when I lived in Chilcotin territory in British Columbia, Canada, which is Chilcotin people are a First Nation or Native American group of people. And we lived in the bush, they call it, very far removed from larger communities. And there were no streetlights. So when we would drive to town, which was the closest town, which was an hour away, to get groceries or go to the bank or whatever, in the darkness of the winter when we drove back, we were really driving in the darkness. And as soon as we would hit the village, as soon as we would come in, there would be this burst of light because everybody had lights on their houses. And it was so beautiful to have that light in the darkness. That way of befriending the darkness, of being welcoming and giving light and direction and hospitality to anyone entering. And there's also something very welcoming and cozy and peaceful about a nice fire in a fireplace. We even watch it on, if we don't have a fireplace, we might even watch it on Netflix or on the TV screen. But despite the dwindling light and the warmth dwindling warmth for us at this time of year in the Northern Hemisphere, the natural world teaches us that there's something going on in the darkness. Growth is happening underneath in hidden ways and in hidden places. And we trust this because we know it year after year. That's part of our growing wisdom. We can count on that. The natural world needs this time of darkness, quiet, bareness, in order to rejuvenate and to burst back with the fullness of life in the spring and the summer. So one of the questions for us tonight in our discussion is, how can we tap into this natural revelation of slowing at a time when we may feel restlessness in our internal and our interpersonal environments, especially as we live the 9th month of the COVID-19 pandemic in this country. We've already been isolated and hidden and quiet and living underground, only going out for the bare necessities for months. What might we learn from the natural processes and rhythms of Earth now that we're living in the winter darkness? So this week, in the email that was sent out to everybody, there were some resources, which included a short address by the UN Secretary General and a video with an interview with Robin Wall Kimmerer. And although these two resources were very different, they were chosen very intentionally because, for me, they each held an important contradiction. They both speak of the stark reality facing our world regarding humanity's relationship with Earth, but they both also place hope and trust in humanity's capacity to respond and to right relationships with the natural world. And for me, that's one of the meanings of peace, and maybe one of the biggest meanings of peace is right relationships with our inner selves, with the natural world, with each other, between nations, right relationships. So more recently, in fact, just on December 2nd, as we see on our screen here, Secretary General Antonio Guterres again called the world to engage in climate action. So the same message as in that address that we all read, or some of us read. And he implores nations and people of goodwill by saying it's time to make peace with the natural world, to make peace with nature. And he claims that this is really the defining issue for our time, peace with nature. So let's listen to this very short articulation of the same message that this address that he gave on December 2nd, which again is this plea on behalf of the human-earth relationship. So I'll play it now.
We are facing a devastating pandemic, new heights of global heating, new lows of ecological degradation, and new setbacks in our work towards global goals for more equitable, inclusive, and sustainable development. To put it simply, the state of the planet is broken. Making peace with nature is the defining task of the 21st century. It must be the top priority for everyone, everywhere. In this context, the recovery from the pandemic is an opportunity. The central objective of the United Nations for 2021 is to build a truly global coalition for carbon neutrality. Funding should flow to the green economy, to resilience and adaptation, and to just transition programs. And we need to align all public and private financial flows behind the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals. We have both a moral imperative and a clear economic case for supporting developing countries to adapt and build resilience to current and future climate impacts. We must use 2021 to address our planetary emergency. Solidarity is humanity. Solidarity is survival. That is the lesson of 2020, with the world in disunity and disarray, trying to contain the pandemic. Let's learn the lesson and change course for the pivotal period ahead.
So the call for us to really work on this relationship with nature seems to be the foundation of which Antonio Guterres speaks. And he's not the only one. But history has proven that just to know that and to do that for moral reasons, because we know it's right, because science tells it so, is often not enough. And often it's the poets and the songwriters that take us to the depths of our heart, where we find that place where we find our own inner peace. And from that place of inner peace grows our ability to have a healthy relationship with Earth on an individual basis, but it also, once we find that within ourselves, wherever we are in the earth, wherever we are in our families, in our communities, in our work, to work from that place of inner peace, we bring it to every environment that we come to. So let's turn to a poet, Wendell Berry, who's a writer and an environmental activist. And he's been writing about this relationship between peace, between humanity and nature for years. And this is one poem that he has written, and he also narrates this video, The Peace of Wild Things.
When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars, waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world, and am free.
So this idea of right relations with the natural world, which is really something that I've harvested in this week in reflecting on these readings and on others, like some of the ones that I want to share with you now, some quotes. There are so many poets and artists and writers, songwriters, leaders who write about peace as the foundation of the natural world relationship with humans, as the foundation of our peace in all other relationships. And some of them are here. Mother Teresa, if we have no peace, it's because we have forgotten that we belong to each other. And Antonio Guterres has just told us that humanity is solidarity. One of my teachers is named Richard Wagasami, and he's an Ojibwe elder who wrote a book called Elders. And I'd like to read to you a short meditation that he wrote about peace. And it's really about this right relationship. I've been considering the phrase, all my relations, for some time now. It's hugely important. It's our saving grace in the end. It points to the truth that we are all related, that we are all connected, that we all belong to each other. The most important word is all. Not just those who look like me, sing like me, dance like me, speak like me, pray like me, or behave like me. All my relations. That means every person, just as it means every rock, mineral, blade of grass, and creature. We live because everything else does. If we were to choose collectively to live that teaching, the energy of our change of consciousness would heal each of us and heal the planet. So the natural world can take us to our natural state of being, inner peace, at home with ourselves. And for those who were able to listen to the video by Robin Wall Kimmerer, she talks about being indigenous or being naturalized to place. And in her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, she talks about this plant. And it's called Plantus majoris, I think is the name of it. It is not native to North America. However, the settlers brought it with them, and now we see it all over the place. I'm sure we all recognize this plant. And unlike some other plants that have immigrated with settlers, this plant has great medicinal purposes. It is a healing plant. It can make tea. And it is good for the environment. It has fit in with the indigenous plants. It has not, created a conflict between the plants that were here when it arrived. So Robin Wall Kimmerer talks about us too as becoming naturalized to place as a way of resolving conflict between indigenous peoples and settler peoples, to learn how to become naturalized to place since we are not indigenous to place. Right relations with the natural world is, as I say, something that I've harvested from my reflections this past week. In the midst of busyness in my inner self, and which then translates into the way I am in my relationships with others and with the natural world. And in its extreme, it extends then to my relationships with the greater community as well. And when we get groups of people and nations who aren't at peace with the natural world, we act towards other beings in a similar way and become complicit in structures that are harmful to other beings and marginalized groups. So I'm going to just stop sharing there now. And I'd like to we were all invited, those who wish, to also bring a symbol tonight. And so I'm going to share my symbol, and then I'm going to ask others to share theirs. My symbol, and your symbol can be something real that you've brought or something you'd like to just tell us about. And mine is a feather. And this is a hawk feather, a red-tailed hawk feather. And the reason that I bring this is that I saw a hawk today. In my walks in Central Park this week, I've been very conscious of our conversation last week about hope. And then I've been also conscious about just walking into the park and asking the beings that live there to speak to me about peace, teach me something about peace. This week I had a lot of busyness going on within me, and I felt the need to just go into that park and kind of be healed by the other beings that were there. And I kind of chuckled because the first time I walked into the park after our conversation last week, a big gust of wind blew me into the park, and there were all kinds of leaves falling off the trees. I thought, oh, okay. That took me back to last week about all those things that we talked about, maybe wanting to let go of by spring. As I walked through the park, I heard somebody singing. Often there are buskers there playing music or singing, and singing a love song. And it felt like the natural world singing to me, because I was open to listen to that, had asked to be open to listen to that. So today I found this, not the feather, but I found this hawk. And hawks, I have a history with hawks. They seem to appear in my life when I need them to appear. And today, a hawk appeared in the park, and I stayed with it for a long time. And that's more than any big insight. It was the staying with the hawk that was my teaching. It flew from tree to tree, and I kind of followed it. And it didn't do anything unusual. And I didn't, as I say, I didn't come up with any big insight about peace. But when I left the park, I felt very much at peace. And I attribute that to the fact that I was able to slow down and focus on the hawk and not on the thoughts in my mind, and just watch that hawk. And that's what the hawk taught me, was just to be myself, just be. And that's what the hawk was doing. It was just being a hawk. So that's my takeaway, and what brought peace, inner peace to me, was that teaching of being myself. And to be myself, to be Sheila, to be a human being, but to be the human being that I am meant to be. So I share that with you, and I now invite anyone else who would like to share anything that has come to you from the readings, from today's reflection, meditation, from your walking with the theme of peace this week. I open it up to whoever would like to start. Liz. You'll have to unmute yourself.
There we go.
Thanks.
Figured out. The Being Native by Robin Kimmerer. I read it like multiple times, and sort of like meditated, with her words. And with other things that I've like with, you know, spiritual prayer and meditation is, for me, the goal is to start with like the peace and the meditation, but then to take it to a place of action, and to like to do something with it. And so just for some reason today, I was reading this afternoon, and I just highlighted the verbs, and it was learn, pay attention, think, explore, live, find, rebuild. And I just found, you know, inspiration in that.
Thank you.
I could go next because I also focused on which of the words kind of echoed in me and kept echoing in me from this week and from the readings. I loved the phrase fall in love with the world and be at home. Right relationships and harmony, make peace with nature. And I was thinking about a couple of things, two symbols. One is a Sarah Thompson song called, I forget what it's called, but it says, all my relations come. A beautiful, beautiful, I think it's a Standing Rock song. Gorgeous, gorgeous song. And so I brought one of my relations here just to share with you today. This is my little friend, Lucky Bamboo, and it lives in my room, and I try to take care of it as best I can. But I think my room has lots of plants, and I like to have those symbols of the natural world close to me. I like the green growing, and I don't know if you can see, but this Lucky Bamboo is kind of woven, and it speaks to me of relationships, of us all depending on one another. All my relations come.
Thank you, Mary.
I can go now. I have two items to share for my table of graces representing peace, although they have kind of a similar idea behind them. One, like Sheila, is also a feather, though I do not know its bird of origin, unfortunately. And the other is this carving, which came from a tree. If you can see, there's kind of a face carved in there of a man with a beard. And this is actually kind of a self-portrait of a man named John Holbrook, who I met in a bait and tackle shop in Appalachia. And it was kind of an organized meeting. I was actually having a sit-down meal in this bait and tackle shop. Very casual meal, as you can imagine, because I was there with a group of students from my university who spend a week essentially learning about essentially the environmental wealth and recent environmental history of the Appalachian region, particularly as a result of all of the mining activities that go on there, and how the impact that that's had on the environment in that part of our country. And so for me, this carving that John gave me as a self-portrait of himself in the tree, on one hand, reminds me of, one, this idea of recognition of self in parts of the natural world, when we talk about this idea of being at war with nature. You know, when I listen to the Secretary General speaking about that, I almost think there's something not quite right in the way that he phrases it, in that, I mean, I guess we can be at war with nature, but only if we're considering it a civil war, because it's not quite right if we separate ourselves as humanity from this concept of nature. It's not we're very much embedded in that concept. And if we are to move past this warlike situation and this turmoil we're experiencing, it will arise out of a recognition that, I mean, we can't be at war with nature. It's part of who we are. We cannot overcome it. We cannot battle it and win by any means. It's a matter of finding a way forward that isn't about winning, but is about finding a winning idea that has no losers. But anyway, so for me, this John Holbrook self-portrait is seeing self in nature and recognizing all of the positive forward movements of nature, the way that it evolves and shapes throughout the season. We also have a share in that. We take part in that. And with your idea of right relationships and peace, this reminds me to be in right relationship with nature is very much kind of this golden rule concept of treat others the way that you want to be treated, because here you are, you're right here in the wood of the tree. And the feather idea came from thinking further on the common phenomenon of migration, animal migration at this time of year, and often with birds that are a great number of the migrating animals. And this idea that being at peace with nature, if you are a migratory bird, means this alignment of the phenomena of, you know, it may be the bird's perspective that's moving south because it's a nicer, more hospitable climate at this time of year. But that's also, and we probably have experienced this, anyone who's not living alone during a time of pandemic, there probably have been moments when you said, I need space. I love the people around me and they're important to me and we are interdependent, but I need space for myself to be and to regenerate. And when I think of animals that migrate, I was imagining there's a lot of regeneration and regrowth and recovery that happens in the habitat that they leave behind. And so in that way, there's kind of a symbiotic relationship. There's a respect for space sometimes and animals often do, and humans have a harder time doing, but learning to let things be and let them regenerate. And so for me, the feather is the migratory animals that give their summer habitat some space.
Thank you, Teresa.
I can share next.
Thank you, Mara.
I actually mentioned this to Teresa in the time between the first meeting and now. The first meeting when we were encouraged to go out and be in nature just for a little minute in the darkness really struck me, and something that has kind of followed me through that has been the moon. I'm sitting in my bed right now and from my window I can see the moon, and it's something that is there, and it seems to be like during the day I'm busy or I'm working or I'm not leaving, and it's when I take that time to sit down that the moon, whether I'm inside or outside, is just such a grounding force and makes me so aware of how small I am and how I fit into this greater sort of in the darkness. And it's the exact conversation about the darkness and the light, and seeing that and kind of feeling that light in the darkness at the end of a day. And just being aware of what that presence is and where we fit into nature, and how it's something that obviously it's not the same every night, and obviously it's not there every night, but it's something that has been really constant, and that sort of centering, grounding piece for me, just as it does for all things in nature, is kind of that pull pulls me and grounds me. And so that has been something that I've gotten an incredible amount of peace from in that understanding.
Thank you, Mara.
I'll share. A phrase that has kind of come up a lot. It came up in kind of my reflections from last week and then kept coming up this week is remember who you are and to whom you belong, or to what you hold true. And I think that really ties to that idea of right relationship, of regrounding within ourselves who we are, in the essence of who we are. And something that I've always identified with is kind of going into darkness to finding that. I'm currently reading, my thoughts are scattered, so I'm going to try to streamline them, but I'm currently reading Underland by Robert Mcfarlane, who's a British naturalist and a writer of landscapes and earth and the world. And through his investigation and his writings of the natural phenomenon, he kind of digs into relationship of humans with the earth as well. And there was just this quote that I highlighted actually just today about this seemingly paradoxical journey of deep diving into what he calls the underland, these unseen natural phenomenon that happened underground, beyond what our vision, in day-to-day vision, like in caves or fungi or moss processes that we don't see so evidently every day. And that idea that darkness might be a medium of vision, and that descent, so going down into that underland area, may be a movement towards revelation rather than deprivation. And that idea, kind of connecting again with last week's ideas of movement and hope and discovery. And coming back to this idea of digging deeper within ourselves and rewriting or reorienting our own relationship with self and others. And I guess I'll share a little piece. This is something that gives me peace. It's, I lived in Peru for 3 years in the Andes, and it's a representation of Mary, but as a mountain, which is very much in the syncretism of the Quechua cosmology and Catholic faith, that Mary, as being the mother of Jesus, is fertile, and that connection to the earth and mountains as being a source where you would harvest potatoes and quinoa. And this is just a reminder of this interconnectedness at a bigger scale as well, not just in expressions of hope and faith and spirituality, but also a global connectedness to my own experience there. That gives me a lot of peace.
Thank you, Teresa.
I was, finding myself saying to someone else this week in my spiritual tradition of, peace be with you, which I've said many times before. But I found myself thinking, or just with a different connotation this week of really meaning towards this person, I wish for you to be free from worry, to be free from anxiety, which I think is a type of peace that I hope for everyone and for this person in particular. So I think I found myself thinking about anxiety and how the experience of anxiety in nature, which kind of what we heard from Wendell Berry is that, you know, it's not really there. Nature doesn't worry about tomorrow, or, you know, there's no despair. And, you know, as I was thinking about this, there's a bird feeder outside my house, and each morning there are different types of birds that sweep in, you know, first the blackbirds and then the blue jays and then the crows, you know, and they all scoot each other out as they compete for the bird feed. But I think it just makes me think about, you know, scarcity, and how some of the lack of peace comes from this feeling we have of scarcity, and the not enoughness of what I have, or the world, or who I am. And so I think, I don't know, I think the opposite of that, the birds, you know, they seem to trust that there is enough. And, you know, I think that is something perhaps other species such as ourselves can learn from, that there is enough to share, to go around, and we are enough as well. So.
Thank you, Susan.
One of the things that Susan just said that really struck me was the idea that there is no anxiety in nature. And I spend a lot of time hiking on the weekends. And so I go to these places that, you know, I'll hike 10 or 15 miles into the woods, and there is a space there where you can camp. And there's often a lot of other people there, a lot of people who are doing the same thing that I'm doing on the weekend. And so it's very alive with human presence in a lot of times. And so I'll sit there often, you know, on the edge of a lake or river or stream, wherever it is. I like to sit on the edge of the water, wherever I am. And I'll think about the peace that is there and the lack of anxiety. But I also think about how when I am not there and I am back at work during the week, the trees and the plants and the animals there are going about their day the same exact way that they are that day when I'm there, just without all of this bustle of human activity. And so that I find peace in that when I'm not there, knowing that all of that is happening even when I can't see it.
Thank you, Jessica. This is such a rich sharing, and as each one shares, it kind of triggers, you know, some of the thoughts that I've had during the week and didn't get a chance to share. But one of the things that came to mind when Teresa was sharing, and I think it was around the idea of being one with nature, that we are, you know, we can't really be at war with nature. I mean, we can, but it's being at war with ourselves, really. And I had this experience when I, you know, used to live out in British Columbia, really very far removed from, you know, cities, towns, whatever. We were living as I say, in the bush, in the mountains. And one time I was climbing a mountain, and it was a little steeper than I thought. And so coming down was very difficult. And I remembered somebody telling me one time, be one with the mountain. And that's what saved me, was be one with the mountain. And I just, basically put my body as close to the mountain as I could. And that's how I came down the mountain, was just like being one with the mountain. And so I guess when you shared that, Teresa, it kind of made me think about also that it's about being one with one with each other, but also being the truth of ourselves. And what you just shared, Jessica, as well, that it's not so much about this dichotomy between things, and it's not the absence of conflict. Peace is not necessarily the absence of conflict, but it's how I enter the reality with myself. It's not, I guess when I was younger, I would always, peace to me was like the absence of like all the awful feelings that I was experiencing, or the uncomfortableness, or the situation that I didn't really want to be in, or just being really tired of something and wishing for something else. But it's really about entering, for me, entering the reality with myself as I am. And that idea of the birds doing the same thing. They're just being birds all the time. And, for me to remember that is a very peaceful thought. And it really helps my body to calm down when I kind of remind myself that's all you have to do is be yourself. And so often the conflict is more a conflict within myself than the actual situation that I might think is conflictual. But it's really about being at home with myself, helps me to enter into other, maybe even enter into an uncomfortable situation. But if I'm comfortable with myself, there's peace there. I also loved what Teresa, you shared about the moon. And I think it was Teresa. Was it Teresa? No, who was it?
Mara.
Mara, yeah, the one sitting on her bed. That's right. Oh, I've lived many, many years with Indigenous peoples in Canada, and the moon is grandmother. So when we talk about all our relations, all my relations, the moon is the grandmother, and she's with us always. And also you talked about being kind of this pull, and that's what the moon does. The moon pulls us and pulls the tides and manages the waters. And yeah, so for Indigenous peoples, and maybe that the moon is grandmother. And yeah, it's very consoling to be bathed in her light. Does anyone else want to share or share again?
I can share. I am Teresa's friend from our cohort. So thank you for having me tonight. When I sat down for meditation, I didn't really bring an item, but the item that came to me was my cat, Karen. And my parents have many pets, and for quarantine, I took 2 of their cats home with me. So I've had them for all of quarantine, and it's been a real exercise for me in terms of patience and my little space, my teeny apartment, has been all mine, and things have not been damaged. And now I have 2 animals that have really been teaching me about relinquishing control and reprioritizing the gift that they give me in companionship and simplicity, and appreciating presence more so than my rug or my bedspread or other things that they have now made their own. And I think that it struck me as funny, Teresa, you talking about how animals have such a good grasp of space, because that has not been my experience, but maybe that's just because they're domesticated animals who have learned our human traits. But yeah, no doors are allowed to be closed anymore, but I now have a wonderful companion to remind me that I am enough, as I think Susan was mentioning before. Just, you know, I don't really need to do anything special to get cuddles every day, and that's a nice way to be.
Thank you, Aisling.
Ashley's share just helped me formulate some of my thoughts, so thank you. One being that I feel the most unrest in myself when I am trying to control things that I can't control. So peace for me is really being able to like sit, and if I'm in nature or watching elements, even fire, water, those sort of things and how they move can be very calming, and you just sort of spend the time to sit with them, that it helps you find that peace. But also what's really amazing about animals, and also nature if you pay attention to it, is that they tell you exactly what they do need if you're paying attention to it.
Thank you, Maggie.
If I may come in again quickly, this idea of control and power in nature, I think one of the most amazing things about being in a natural space is this idea of wilderness. And there's so much you shared, you know, there's poetry, there's art, there's so much inspiration around this idea, this mystique of this concept of wilderness and wildness, in the idea that these are things that are not under control, or specifically they're not under human control. There is much work going on. There are many creatures working to shape what is wilderness in some particular fashion, and to us it looks like chaos. And there's something really beautiful in that. That's just it's calling to us on some level. It's why we go there for peace. That somehow we, I think, get it backwards in our minds sometimes, that like peace is in the control. But yet we have this, you know, the world far beyond the controlled, paved, climate controlled environments that we create for ourselves. There's something deeper calling to us actually for this idea of wilderness and wild spaces and what feels like a lack of human control. And that's bringing us a deeper solace than we're finding in our created spaces. And so I think there's really something there for us to pay attention to in this idea of trying to cultivate peace for ourselves. Is like, we have made many grand efforts at creating peace out of control, and there's still something missing. And so then, you know, this idea of peace of the peace of wild things speaks to a deeper, more innate desire that's just never going to be found in the package of control.
Thank you, Teresa. Well, we're coming to the end of our time together, and with all those very insightful, inspiring, and very challenging sharings, I think that we're taking away a very beautiful and rich harvest from this conversation on peace. And I'd like to just offer one last blessing, which is also by John O'Donoghue, and I need 4 people to be readers. There are 2 slides, so 2 people to read the first slide alternately, and 2 people to read the second slide alternately. So could I have 2 volunteers for the first slide? Rachel and Teresa. And for the second slide? Peggy and Maggie. Thank you. So I'll just share the screen again. Whoops. So we can just read this alternately, and the 2 who are doing the first slide could begin.
As the fever of day calms towards twilight, may all that is strained in us come to ease.
We pray for all who suffered violence today. May an unexpected serenity surprise them.
For those who risk their lives each day for peace, may their hearts glimpse providence at the heart of history.
That those who make riches from violence and war might hear in their dreams the cries of the lost.
That we might see through our fear of each other a new vision to heal our fatal attraction to aggression.
That those who might enjoy the privilege of peace might not forget their tormented brothers and sisters.
That the wolf might lie down with the lamb, that our swords be beaten into plowshares.
And no hurt or harm be done anywhere along the holy mountain.
Thank you, everyone, for your beautiful sharing, for your time, for being together in this circle. And we look forward to continuing the discussion on the theme of joy next week with Mary Finlayson. And Mary, do you have anything you'd like to share?
Yes, I do. You'll receive an email during the week with some things to help you prepare for our sharing on joy. And yesterday, I don't know if anybody else saw it, but in the New York Times, there was this article called "Find the Joy, Then Spread It." And I thought, well, that's a good title. But it was about ways people had been noticing joy or the spreading of joy. Beautiful, beautiful little article. So I think we need joy right now. It's the 3rd week of Advent coming up. We light the pink candle for those who have Advent wreaths. So I just invite us this week to be aware of joy inside and joy around us. And maybe if you want, bring a word or a symbol or something about joy. And next week we will come together to share our joy.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of the evening, the late evening or the early evening, wherever you are.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Good to see
Thanks.
you.